Um, as we discussed last time, we were going over where the word comes from, and we went through a few of the languages and the order that it goes in. And I just wanted to go over the definitions of those locations and related cultures. I'm just going to go in chronological order here of how I had it, which goes Old Greek, starting with Old Greek. From Old Greek, uh, Atlantos, which means equal in weight, which is the masculine name. Number two is going to be the from regular Greek, uh, which is Atlantikos with a KOS at the end, meaning of Atlas, which is a adjective that's been converted from a noun into an adjective. Uh, and it refers also to the mountains of Atlas in Morocco, which are derived from the Atlantic Berber language of that region. Number three, which is the, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Atalanti. The A means in usage, it expresses unity, and then Talaton, which is the other half of the word, which is balance. And then from the Greek poet, uh, Polyidus in 398 BC tells a tale of Atlas. According to Ovid, Perseus arrives in Atlas's kingdom and asks him for shelter, declaring that he is the son of Zeus, a son of Zeus. Atlas refuses to give him sanctuary because he had heard a legend or a prophecy, and that the son of Zeus would come and steal his golden apples out of his orchard. So he refused him. Basically, it's saying that Prometheus, representing the Greeks, obviously saying that the Greeks had gone to the mid Atlantic at one point in time, but they were turned away because they were worried about him stealing technology, basically, is what that kind of translates to, even though they don't say it that exact way. Um, and then Latin, which is alante, from which is derived from the Greek alanti, which is the feminine name of Atlantos, which is also Greek, having the same value as a male. Then there's also in Latin Atlanticus, which is actually Roman. Sorry, it was the Roman conversion of the name from the which comes from the Atlantic Ocean, derived from the Old Latin, which took it from the Old Greek word Atlanticus. So basically, it's kind of a loop where they're just showing the chain of it, that these names are coming back from each other. There's an overlap there. There's also a mention in Latin of Atlanta, which y'all might be familiar with Atlanta in the Americas here. It's derived from a Greek translation, which speaks of Atlantis and also of Atlas. It describes the people in this story. I might look it up if you get a chance. I didn't write down all the details of it, although I do have it in the directory available. But for etymology purposes, I didn't want to get into the story. It was just the root that I needed. And then in English, Atlas is Atlant. What they did is, once again, they took it from a noun from the 14th century English word, which took it from a French word, which took it from the Greek, and so it just basically loops back around. But that's why there's that little diversion there in the language tree. Um, then also Mid English, they add the IC at the end of the name Atlas to which gives us the Atlantic, um, which is a body of water. So we're finding that basically in the name, it's going to be describing either the person, the place, which would be the ocean there, and then there's also the people. And so that's the distinction. It's pretty much the same name repetitively over and over as far as the derivative, but there's the difference between the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean versus Atlas, the person, versus Atlanteans, the people. So yeah, in the etymology, it goes farther. The best reference we have so far is the Berbers that migrated into that region um, around 45,000 BC. I put that in the nest also, a little map that shows what I'm talking about there, just some pictures to help people in their mind. Then there's also a Mesoamerican language root to the word. In fact, it was the first one I found that it's the atl, ATL. That particular prefix is found originally in a codex, Aztec codex, and it is the word for water for them. And then all the different versions of as land or At's land and all these other variances in the Mesoamerican language all come from that same original derivative, though. So it's the atl that they're concerned about in their language. And then the Greek tried to, if you want to just take the word or the name Atlantis, which is everybody's been in dispute over that origin for a long time. We assume it's Greek because Plato mentions it. But apparently Plato had made the word up because as we go over the origins of the Greek words for Atlas, Atlanteans, and the place of Atlantis, they already have different words for it. So when Plato comes along and changes it or makes up this name for it, I was able to break down the suffix, root, and or the prefix, suffix, and root of it. And just by going by the Nahuatl language, which is the Mesoamerican Aztecian language, the atl would mean water, the an would mean land, and the tis, uh, according to what I found, is it actually means waterland of something, someone important or something important. And so I'm assuming in that the translation basically is talking about Atlas without saying his name, basically. So it's associated with him, but it doesn't translate exactly as the people of or anything like that. The actual translation is waterland of someone important would be how it would translate, as far as the word Atlantis. So um, then there's some other translations in Greek also that I put in there just because people are going to be like, hey, there's another word for it. And what's the definition of that? And how does that associate? So I went ahead and put that in there too. But the only last one I really want to point out is Atlantes, which came about 7,500 BC. That the invading Greeks into Northwest Africa had called it that, and that's because it came from the name Atlas. But they had picked it up. The Greeks at that particular time period had picked it up from the Mauritanian Berbers, which they had a legend about a king Atlas that ruled in that area. That ruled a city state there at where what we call the Rychek structure location is. And supposedly that would have been between 1645 BC and 11600 BC. Basically, the younger Dryas ended up destroying that civilization in that city. But the Mauritanians were able to retain a legend about this Atlas character. They say that, according to legend, he was a wise philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer who supposedly made the first celestial sphere. It was this Atlas that Mercator was referring to when he first used the name Atlas for a book of maps in 1559. That refers to a Greek guy that had made the first atlas, as we call them these days, which is basically a book of maps that has some other information in it as- associated with geographical information. And so, yeah, I thought that was a little neat tidbit. And well, that's pretty much the big part of it. There's more details about the Berber because I found some through the Moors, through the Moorish records of the Berbers that they had come from, their descendants. I was able to find this one little passage, the region being called Akasha in antiquity, which lied within the Zahar Suz. Zahar, this refers to a pre-Sahara desert northwest region, and then Suz or Suz refers to the later Eye of Sahara Arachek structure location. And so I thought that was interesting, especially its geographical location to the Atlas Mountains. It's not that far away. Um, and so there definitely is a linguistic connection there that keeps coming up, and it also seems to be the oldest reference I have is through the Berber. And even that isn't definitive in the sense that it's not obtained through their written record. It's obtained through the name of their language, and then also ethnic migrations, and then also the pertaining names of the region and ocean. Uh, so that's how I was able to get that information. But I just want to indicate that you're not going to be able to just look that up and go, okay, where did they say, where did these Berbers say this? I honestly don't know. I couldn't get any farther than, say, Wikipedia on that dig when it comes to the legend of Atlas. Maybe somebody else could do a little more digging on that one and give me some feedback to add into it because I am curious for sure. And well, that's pretty much the big chunks of the etymology. I did put the some more stuff at the bottom that goes more into detail of those particular branches, but yeah, that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of it.
So the one when you said Atlas, you said that one was on Wikipedia.
Yes, the Legend
Yeah,
of
the Legend of
Atlas.
Atlas. Oh,
Far as the Mauritanian legend of
okay.
Atlas.
No, I was just wondering because I'm gonna go look up
Yeah,
that in a minute or later on. When I
absolutely.
find it, did you look at the reference? Did it have like a reference number next to it? Because sometimes they have like a reference number next to it. And that's where you can dig further. Is that how you dug further into it?
No, that one I didn't follow up on for years. This is from years ago that I had gotten it out of Wikipedia. But it did give me clues, which made me investigate the Berbers specifically and the Basque uh, for that link that I was looking for geographically associated with his name. And so basically the point is no matter where you get it from, Latin, French, English, uh, it all derives from that atlas and from those descendants. So they had migrated from the mid-Atlantic into all kinds of regions, and it's well documented in the genetic records because you have a major migration of Cro-Magnon bleeding into areas that were previously occupied by Neanderthals. And so there is a little bit of a genetic record or evidence of that. Unfortunately, our language records don't seem to go that far back. Maybe we're just not looking in the right place yet, but and then I also found additional support of Mesoamerican records about Atlas and Atlantis in the sense that they do have a legend about coming from the mid Atlantic and that being their mother colony. But uh, the problem with that, from what I've been able to research and find, is that there was multiple disasters and multiple migrations. And so some of the confusion comes with the name Aztec, for example. The Aztec actually go farther back than we know because by the time they mention them in physical record and within linguistic records, they're referring to the more modern Aztec, um, when in fact the Aztec actually predate most of the Mesoamerican cultures that had migrated there, with the exception of, say, um, the Olmec. The Olmec are equal or as old as far as colonies into the Americas, which goes pretty far back. I originally just thought that at the very end of the Younger Dryas, Atlantis, or this place in the mid Atlantic, had collapsed and went under the ocean, and everybody just, huh?
Mayan and Aztec legend. Now, of course, the written records were destroyed.
Correct, correct. There are a couple of codices left that have mention of, but they're hard to find, and there's only a couple. So this, the point I was bringing up is the timeline that disaster during the Younger Dryas. We thought originally that that was basically the only migration to follow back to the Atlantic, but apparently there were several other migrations that predate that significantly. There was a major flux around 45,000 BC, another one around 28,000 BC. Uh, so there's a couple of more migrations that weren't calculated in that. So fortunately, it just gives us a little more reference to its origin, because unfortunately, you can't go and test the people of the Azores right now and take their genetic makeup and compare it to the rest of the world, and because those colonists are Portuguese and came about much, much, much later, long after the Dryas, and so genealogically they're not going to be connected, and so it's not a good route to pull. So we basically, the problem is, if this place really did exist in the mid-Atlantic, tracing it is going to be very difficult, because it's not there anymore. You can't compare it. You can't take a sample from there and go, hey everybody, I found it over in China, here's some genetic material that matches, or something like that. So that's the unfortunate part of that. However, fortunately, the Berbers and the Basque are a good clue in genetics, because they have distinctive genetics of over 50% O negative blood type. And then on top of that, they have a high percentage of the rhesus negative. Uh, so genetically speaking, they can kind of be traced to the O blood type. That's not definitive, but all of the ones that we believe migrated out of the mid Atlantic for the most part do have that O type
See,
blood.
that's interesting
Um,
to me because that's near Morocco,
yes,
and
Morocco's is the Moroccan
yeah,
Berbers,
and then if you
absolutely, which ended up being
yeah,
Moors,
and if you look at
which would also explain their technology. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no,
Go ahead.
I'm glad because from what I know and research that I studied, uh, if you want some mysterious people, they're the oldest set of Homo sapien bones were found in Morocco, Africa, and they had like what they consider elongated heads. There's actually a peer review studied on it, right? And on that side of the world, you said that's where we get the closest of Atlantis. And few days that you talked about this, it was interesting because I've heard a lot of what you said, and like you said, there's really no way that we can say, "Oh yeah, boots on ground, take a sample, and this is the place to be." We can only go off of IR ideas, and in many cases. So, would you agree to say that Plato would be the starting point on trying to figure this out?
Yes, sir, actually, because even though, okay, the deal about his record, supposedly he had gotten it from a relative named Solon around 600 BC, and Solon had gone to Sais in Edfu, um, Egypt, and that temple doesn't exist anymore, but Edfu does, the complex, but there's multiple, sites within it. And so that's supposedly that stela there is where he had gotten the information for it. But of course, he changed the names. He even identifies that he quote unquote Greekified them. So he did change the names, and so that's what made it so hard, because everybody's hardcore on that particular word or terminology, Atlantis. They're stuck on that word, and that word's not even a real word. They didn't call themselves that. No, there was never a Atlantean that ever called themselves from say that they were from Atlantis. That's a made up Greek word. But it took me years to figure it out and break it down and find out where you know, where he went wrong or how he made it up. I had to have other Greek references to the name and people and ocean in order to figure that out.
I'm still pretty
This was
skeptical.
before the
It's
Greek
hard for me
civilization, though.
to right, and I went back and reread my Plato, and I verify what you're saying because it just seems like yeah. Well, I'll say this about Atlantis. I view it kind of like Anunnaki. It's yeah, we have some reference to it in the ancient world. Like he said, we don't really have any real evidence in any way, shape, or form, and we have root words. And I find the 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 root word of ATL to be a very common and natural human expression. It's very easy to say Atlantis or Atlantic or you know what I mean. And so I find like okay, so that could just be human language. You know what I mean, derived from ancient Sumeria, going into Greek, going into modern Latin, and then of course into English. I'm still have it. I'm trying to keep an open mind, and I'm not trying to start anything with anybody. So I'm largely just keeping quiet and just seeing what he's got to say. And but I'm not really. He's not really hitting on anything for me that's making me swing one way definitively or the other.